What you see here is just a very small sampling of what is available on Covenant Media Foundation. They have thousands of hours worth of lectures, seminars, and so forth from a multitude of people, to include Greg Bahnsen, on a multitude of topics: ethics, philosophy, theology, apologetics, you name it. Check them out at covenantmediafoundationnow.org, cmfnow.org.
The last 2 years that I've been at the Life Preparation Conference, I've been speaking on apologetics, but it wasn't called practical apologetics the last 2 years, so that was impractical apologetics they had previously, and now this year we're going to get around to the practical apologetics. Now actually, it's being called practical apologetics because Gary wanted me especially to emphasize answering specific, detailed problems and objections that are raised against the Christian faith. And I won't spend a lot of time, in the process I'll have to spend some time, but I won't spend a lot of time dealing with apologetical theory and procedure, or if you will, the abstract steps behind it. I'm going to try to take up problem after problem after problem and deal with it. And in the process, you should learn how to do apologetics by watching what's done. I want to really encourage you to not simply try to memorize the answers that Dr. Bahnsen or somebody else might have to a particular problem. It is helpful to get started by hearing somebody defend the faith and know what they say. But it's far more important that you learn the method. And so if you watch all of the different problems being dealt with, ask yourself, what is he doing here? What kinds of maneuvers is he using intellectually? What kind of reasoning is being applied to answer this problem? And the reason why I want you to do that is, in the 10 hours, I guess that's what I'm going to be using this week, Lord willing, I can't possibly answer every particular problem, deal with every false religion out there, every cult and so forth. It's just not possible. There's really two different ways to approach apologetics. I want you to think of yourself as being in a room with a man that has a revolver. You have no weapon to use against him, okay? And he's got all these bullets in his gun, and he's getting ready to shoot you, and there's no exit. Now, as I see it, there are two things you can do. Or if you knew you were going to be put into this room, there are two ways you could prepare. One way to prepare to deal with all of those bullets that are going to be shot at you is to practice dodging bullets. Really work on all the maneuvers, back and forth, and up and down, and so forth. And so you say, I hope that even though this guy's got 6 or 8 bullets in his gun, that I can just jump around and miss. He just won't hit me any of those times. Or another way would be to practice disarming your opponent so that he is not able to shoot anymore. Now, of those two, which do you think would be the more practical way to approach apologetics? If we have any bullet dodgers out there in the audience, this week's going to disappoint you. Though I'm going to be dodging some bullets, dealing with specific arguments, what I want you to learn is how to get the gun out of the other guy's hand. I want you to disarm your opponent. And the method of apologetics that I teach, it's often called in academic circles presuppositional apologetics, is especially designed to do that, to go after the presuppositions by which the opponent of Christianity is able to shoot those bullets at you. And you're going to take away his ability to do that. Okay, so we're going to be looking at specific arguments. Now, toward the end of my second lecture hour this afternoon, we're either going to pass out some cards to you or ask you to donate your own paper to the cause. And I would like you to be thinking right now, or throughout my lecture, what is the toughest, or for some of you maybe 2 toughest arguments you've run into against your Christian faith? I want you to write those down and turn them in so that over the next few days I can organize them and look at them myself and make sure, if at all possible, that's going to be my goal, to in one way or another address every one of those in the process of doing my lectures. I would like you to know that the particular problem that you've heard does have an answer. And I think we should be able to accomplish that. It all depends on how wide, how varied the problems are. So be thinking about that. I'd like to hear your specific and detailed, and the toughest thing you've heard, or maybe you honestly don't know yourself. You say, well, what do I say when somebody says if God is all good and all powerful, he should be able to and willing to stop the wars that are in the world. But since there is war, he's either not all good or he's not all powerful. And we call that the problem of evil. You don't have to know the name of the problem. But if you've heard somebody say that, or if just in your own heart you've thought to yourself, I don't know about it. How can Christianity be true given, and then whatever it is? You write that down. You do not have to put your names on there. If you wish to put your name on there, then I'll know who to speak to about it if you want to come up and talk more and so forth. But you give me those and I'll try to address them. So let's get started. How do we answer objections to the Christian faith? When I was getting ready to come to the conference, I left from Orange County to fly here. I had to fly through Chicago, which is interesting routing, go to Chicago so you can get to Atlanta, but nevertheless the flight was delayed for a few minutes, and if you know anything about people who fly a lot, they get very nervous, and so the stewardess got on the line and was telling everybody, don't worry, we're delayed here at the gate because we have to finish up some paperwork for the mechanics that are down below. I've always thought, if you tell people mechanics are looking at this plane and we're going to have to wait a few minutes to get you in the air, maybe that would worry them all the more, you know. I mean, mechanics are fixing something. I sure hope they fix it right. Well, as a matter of fact, there are just standard things, whether the plane's in good or bad condition, that they have to go through and they have to check off to make sure that they have flight clearance and they can back away from the gate and then go on out and the tower will let them take off. So what I would like to do is something similar. I'm going to give you a checklist of things to be looking for when someone argues against the Christian faith, so you can figure out whether their argument flies or not. Will this thing, really, get into the air and be able to sustain itself or not? And you want to go through in your mind mentally this checklist. Now, I suppose you could write it all down very small on a card and pull it out every time somebody's arguing with you and say, okay, now, what about this? Maybe for the first few times you will do that, I don't know, but that's not what I have in mind. I would like to tell you what the checklist is so you have some idea, internalize this so you can use it. When you're sitting at the university and you hear a professor say things that are contrary to the Christian faith, start asking these questions. And I've tried to boil it down to just 4, although there are going to be some subdivisions underneath that. But if you can remember these 4 issues, I guarantee you will be able to deal with any argument that comes up. I don't care what bullets they put in their gun, you're going to be able to take the gun away. The 4 things that we're talking about here amount to the key intellectual sins that all men commit. Sadly, Christians commit these sins too. We're not here to talk about renovating the mind and sanctification of our thinking process as Christians so much this week. We're going to be looking at the foibles and defects of unbelieving thinking. But I want you to know that what I'm talking about, though it's being applied to apologetics, really has application through all of the different departments of the university as well. Any person who is an academician must worry about these issues when he publishes something, when he puts an article out there, when he gives a lecture, whatever it may be. Every argument can be evaluated in terms of these things. First of all, you want to ask, is he being arbitrary? And I'm going to have, according to my notes, 4 subdivisions here of different kinds of arbitrariness. But let me get through the main divisions first. Ask, is this argument arbitrary? Secondly, ask whether this argument is inconsistent. That is there something wrong with this argument because it's in conflict with itself or with some other known truth? Thirdly, ask about the consequences of this argument. This is what is known in the Bible as judging a tree by its fruit. Look at the consequences of the argument. And then finally, it's hard to put this into one word, and I promise I'll explain it later, but for brevity, I'm going to call it asking about the preconditions of this argument. I think some of you know that part of the ministry the Lord has given me, and has been very gracious to me about, is public debate. And when I go to a debate, although I try to read what my opponent has written and know something in advance, It is far more important to me to know how to argue with people. So, whatever kind of thing the opponent comes up with, I'll be able to deal with. It's far more important to master the technique than the specific things that he has